Just keep watching there. And that means we can start. And Sarah will just keep letting people in, hopefully, as they come. She'll be on it. All right. Let me pray for us, and then I'll introduce what we're doing, and then we'll just jump in. Thank you, our God, that you are a God above all other gods, because we're talking about a lot of different weird beings, and you're above them all, and you created them all, and we're grateful for that. We thank you for creating us and bringing us into your world. We thank you for the gospel, and we pray that you continue to bring that ever to our minds, that it would never grow dim in our minds, never be ritual, never be something that's taken for granted. So thank you for the good news that you are the King and that we can follow you and join this kingdom. Lord, be with us as we talk today and think about these weird, bizarre creatures that you have made. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, so here we go. We are talking about, what do we say? Let's see, what are my 5 Ds that Sarah's not happy that I added another D? Let's see, demons, deities, destroyers, dragons, and death. Weird, bizarre creatures in the biblical literature. We're very cognizant of trying to say things like the biblical literature instead of saying in the world, because that's a theology discussion that we'll have. But we're trying to deal with the text. We're trying to deal with literature. And then later on, we take it into theology, right? We understand the difference. Not everybody understands that all the time. But the Bible is a whole series of texts. It's a library of texts. And it comes from lots of different people's understanding of the way things worked back then, the way they understand God. That's the literature. And then what we've got to do is take all of this literature, work it somehow together, not necessarily compiling it, but seeing all the different things. And then sometimes what we end up doing is compiling it and coming up with our answer for what actually exists in reality. And that's always a little bit dangerous. That's why everybody comes up with such different theology. So we're always that's why every church has its own different views. We're trying to stay with the literature, and then we mess around with the theology a little later. So we're talking about these weird, bizarre creatures that God has allowed us to see in the literature that his people have been writing about. We talked about weird, fiery, flying snakes last week and the week before, which we call seraphim. That later on became just a class of angels, but they certainly weren't that in the beginning. And today we're going to be talking about another cool thing. So these things are mentioned about 91 times, actually I think exactly 91 times in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And they are a composite hybrid guardian monster. Okay. Composite hybrid guardian monster. And what we call them now are these little fat babies with wings on them. Like, it's the weirdest journey. I don't know how we got from these composite, horrible, terrifying, four-faced monsters with wings to little tiny baby cherubs that sing and sometimes look like, with cupids. By the way, they're different. Cherubs and cupids are different, but they sure look the same to me. I have no idea what the difference is in our modern world. But you guys remember, let me share my screen with you here. At some point I have to get better at sharing screens so I can do it quickly. Do you guys remember this?
Yep.
Does anybody remember that picture? Has anybody seen that before?
The Ark of the Covenant.
That's the never-ending story.
All right. It kind of looks like the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, and Josh said, what did you say, Josh?
It's the never-ending story, yeah.
The Never-Ending Story. Do you guys remember that movie?
No.
Never-Ending Story. It's a great story about somebody who sits down with a book and starts reading this book, and he enters into the book, and the book ends up being somehow about him, but not really about him. And he goes on this this quest to find the answer to the nothing that is coming, nothing, which in the biblical worldview, nothing is disorder. It's uncreated mess. It's what happens after God says, I'm done with this world. Then we have the nothing. So in this particular story, Atreyu, who is, you can see the back of his head in this one, has to go on this quest, and he has to go through these two beings, whatever the heck they are. Right? They don't ever tell you, but as he gets closer, their eyes open just a little bit, just a tiny little bit. And what you want to do is you don't want their eyes to open, because once their eyes open, they shoot lasers out of their eyes and they destroy the people who are crossing by. They are boundary, they're guardians, right? They're to keep you from going too far, right? So that's kind of the idea. But these particular ones, they don't have talons, they don't have lion bodies, and most of them usually have that. So let me just go ahead and show you a picture of some of the things that are out there. Okay, so this is one of them. You can see it's got the face of a man, a bearded man, but the body of something else there, and you can see the wings that are going back. Here's another picture of a lion man winged thing. You can see that. Here's another one. I don't know what's up with the obviously this is it's broken, so you don't have the front claws or anything, and the wings are broken, but you see this is an artifact. So all these are artifacts that we found in archaeology. And now I got to figure out how to stop sharing. Stop share. Okay. So these hybrid creatures, and I say they're hybrid, like remember most of the monsters are hybrid in some way. That's what monsters are. They dwell in some underworld or somewhere far off the beaten path, and they're like Frankenstein, right? They're kind of pieces of different things. And so this hybrid creature guards the area between two realms. So whatever these realms are, in our case, in the biblical literature, the realms are heaven and earth. Big surprise, right? The place where God dwells and the place where man dwells. But they don't only exist in biblical literature. That's the cool thing. These aren't just Bible creatures. These exist across all kinds of barriers. So like the Epic of Gilgamesh has these scorpion type creatures that guard the entrance so that the sun god can go on his daily journey, right? So they stand at the gate, these scorpion creatures, to let the sun god do what it has to do. Nobody else can get in there, but the sun god can do his journey across the, from the east to the west, like sun gods do, of course. The Epic of Creation in Babylon, the Babylonian Epic of Creation, has the dragon Tiamat. Tiamat is the really well-known hybrid dragon person goddess thing, and she has, sorry, she's not hybrid, she's a dragon. She has a hybrid infantry at her beck and call. So when she makes her noise, whatever it is, they come running, and they're these weird creatures. We got these in every movie, right? There's weird, just like half creatures of this and half creatures of that. Can you give me any examples of these half creatures, hybrid creatures?
Flying monkeys.
Perfect. Yes, Wizard of Oz. Good one. I hadn't thought of that one.
Minotaur.
Yeah. What was that?
Minotaur.
Minotaur. Yeah, that's right. Yep. Sure. Yeah. It's a great one. Come on.
Underdog.
Underdog. Oh, interesting. Yes, that's a great
I
one.
love that one.
A dog who can talk and fly, and yeah. Okay.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah. I mean, these are talking turtles that are ninjas. Yeah.
I
Pretty much
saw
does it.
them today.
You saw a Ninja Turtle today?
I saw them today.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I've never seen one.
On TV, of course, with a
Michelangelo,
5-year-old.
Donatello. Yeah. That's great.
In Narnia, I forget what they're called.
Centaurs, yeah.
Centaurs, yeah.
Yeah. Very similar to the Minotaur. Yeah, centaurs. So horse people instead of like bull people. Yep. Like Percy Jackson has this, like, and Percy Jackson actually is kind of a hybrid, but he looks like a real person. You guys read the Rick Riordan books, Percy Jackson, but also there's tons of other creatures in there that are actually hybrid forms of things. Or half of the comic superheroes, other than Underdog, even like, I guess like even like Wolverine is kind of one, right? He's kind of like an animal. He has claws that come out. He has a super sense of smell, right? He's kind of animalistic. He goes berserker rage sometimes, like, Catwoman. I guess she's all cat. She just pretends. But like Tigra in the Marvel, you get the idea, right? So we got all these different kinds. Cerberus is that three-headed dog. You remember that from like Harry Potter? I think it shows up in Harry Potter. Guards one of the basement. See, I didn't actually watch it, but I remember somebody telling me about it.
Yes,
Or maybe I saw
that's
a picture
true.
of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori, who has read it. And I think Cerberus has these like snakes, these wiggling snakes that come from their body guarding the gates of the underworld, right? In order to get to Hades, you got to go through this dog. That's how it works. So this word, I won't write it, but charuv, it's that CH sound again, the Hanukkah, right? Or the chesed, Hanukkah cheruv, right? This is the cherub, CHERUB, cherub. And it's actually related to an Akkadian word they think that includes, like, it's a meaning for hybrid monster. That's kind of like what it means. It means, hi. I never have anybody walk in when I'm teaching. Hello. Okay. All right. So they exist in Syria. They exist in Egypt. They exist. I mean, you know them from Egypt, right? They're still there. You can go see them. They're in the middle of the desert. Actually, I've never been to Egypt, but Risten's been to Egypt, and we don't have Michael Gendy on here.
I've been
He's
there.
Egyptian. Okay, Fran's been there. They're sphinxes, right?
Yep.
That's what these things are. Okay, they look very similar. That's probably in the realm of what we're talking about. And what they do is they surround the throne. Syrian ones actually have the gods connected to the sphinx in some way or to this thing. They put them, like, how they come forward like this, and they have their paws out here. On their paws, they put the gods. They put different gods or kings there. So they're like protecting the gods from harm or whatever. So yeah, and we have lots of pictures from second millennium all the way up until about 7th century BC. So 2,000 years to 700 years before Christ. We just have lots of different artifacts and things like that. You can find Baal Haman. You can find Astarte on the claws. You can find just all these different gods that are there. Even El is, you remember El, right? That one's a really hard one to spell. But this is the one that you guys know because it's God. So it's the word for God, Elohim, right? So God himself is found on the El stele. So, okay, steles are usually like these like monument stones, kind of like the obelisk in the front in DC. What do we call that? National Monument, right? That would be like a gigantic stele, but it's not really one. It's just a symbol of something like that. But they have these monument markers, and then they'll be writing on them, stuff like that. It'll tell you stories and stuff. So there's the El stele. So I should probably write this up here. So cherub, right, is the word we're talking about. Cherubim is what?
Plural.
Plural.
Plural. Good. We're learning our Hebrew. Woohoo! Cherubim, like Elohim, right? This last piece here, the im, is plural. Gods, Elohim, or seraphim. So I could easily just say cherubs. Technically, that's how you'd say it in English, right? Cherubs. But it's kind of grabbing hold of the Hebrew because we don't know what to call them, so we just call them the same word. So that's charuv, charufim. All right. So Ugaritic stele, got it. Okay. And the whole idea, again, is that these cherubim stand in order to let the gods or angels or whatever class needs to enter or exit from sacred realms. So you can't just get into a sacred realm because you feel like getting there. You don't just jump into it. Something needs to take you there, or you need to be allowed to get through it by this monstery thing. So, Bible. Okay, I've given you kind of the big picture of what it looks like in the ancient world. Let's see if the Bible is going to call us to the same kinds of things. All right, so first time that we see cherubim is where? You guys all know this story.
Genesis.
It's a famous one.
Yeah, Genesis.
Yes.
Genesis.
Genesis 3. Yep. So I'm just going to read that one real quick, but I'll have you guys read Exodus 25 with me. But you know this one, right? After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. Okay, so this is to guard the way to the tree. So how is that guarding the way to sacred space that I'm talking about? What's the connection that needs to be made here?
The tree is heavenly sacred space.
Yeah. Eden equals, God's space, right? Sacred space.
Would they be like the curtain?
We're getting to that. That's exactly what's happening. Okay, so that when you see in the temple later on, you'll see that they write on the curtain, right? Oh, you're probably not even saying that necessarily. You're just saying, are they a way to keep you out? Yes. But in the temple, you may or may not know, I don't know, they would actually embroider cherubim on the into the curtain of the temple because you're not allowed to get in there. But they have a lot more guardians than that in the temple. Well, we'll get to there in a minute. It's also good to say maybe early on that the literature works backwards. So for instance, your temple, literature about the temple is probably the first literature written. Literature about the tabernacle is probably second. Literature about Eden is probably third. Okay, when it comes to when these texts arrive in the literature, right? When they start being written. Okay, so it's people from the temple period that are writing things about the temple, and then they're going back and creating stories. And I don't mean fictional. I don't mean they're like making them whole cloth, but I mean they're telling the stories of the tabernacle in relation to the temple that they know, and then they're making Eden fit into that whole same story. So Eden is this sacred space, right, where the trees are. And you can't get in and out of sacred space. This is the place where heaven and earth meet. Okay, so we always try to think about these two different realms, right? This is Eden. And their job, this is earth, and this is heaven. We'll just call it that, right? God's space and man's space. Their job is to make sure that you can't get in. So what we want to do is we want to get back into the space. That's actually kind of the story of the whole Bible, right? Is this attempt to get back into sacred space. So even as early as Genesis chapter 4, Cain and Abel are going to try to get back into the sacred space by offering the deity what they think he wants. Right? Hopefully this will appease Elohim or Yahweh. Right? So they're going to try and get back in. So that's their job, is to flaming sword this. I don't know how to make a sword. Right? Flame. I know that's why you come here for my artwork. So I just thought I could throw that in there. They keep you in your space. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. There's Lori making a lot of noise in the background there. I got it now. All right.
Okay, Jace, I'm sorry.
yes,
I have never heard that they were offering sacrifices to get back into Eden.
Yeah,
They
it
left
says
that
that.
out of the Sunday school lesson, I think.
Yeah, they leave a lot of things out. So it's not going to be very clear when you look at the English, but if you read the Hebrew, you can see that it says that they offered them at the door or at the entrance. And so there's an assumption made at a door to what? And since sacrifices are always made at the door to the temple, and Eden is for sure supposed to be an image of the temple, right? Sacred space.
Yeah.
That you start making these assumptions that they're putting these sacrifices at the door of the temple or the
Oh,
door
okay.
to Eden.
Cool.
So, and remember, this is what happens whenever we're dealing with temples or tabernacles or anything like that, is they're entering through these realms, right? They're entering into these realms and they have to go through into the holy place and then to the Holy of Holies, which is, this is heaven of heavens. This is where God lives. Okay, this is where God almost lives, but we got a curtain here to make sure. And we got a whole bunch of smoke that's going to be and from the incense, and we're going to have like stars and stuff like that on all the walls that'll allow you to enter into the first heaven and then into the second heaven. So whenever you think about the tabernacle or the temple, you should probably try to think of it inverted like this instead of like this, because we're kind of moving from earth into the heavenly place. And so you do your sacrifices, well, in the temple here, but also out here and here. The altar and the laver, the sea. The land and the sea is what they're called. Which is just cool symbolism, right? Like this is supposed to be earth. This is where earth takes place. And then this is that middle spot, and then this is all the way into God. So they're doing their sacrifice on the way to get to God. And so the smoke is supposed to go up into God's nostrils, and he's supposed to be appeased in some sense, satisfied with the death of whatever it is that's died. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. So I say, let me just read what I'm writing here because I got a long paragraph. This idea is buttressed, the fact that the temple, if they go into the temple, this idea is buttressed when we see the cherubim again in the tabernacle. In fact, the tabernacle is made because it was important that God dwell with the people, and the people were mobile. So hence you needed a mobile God, right? Because God had to go around with them wherever they went. So they have the footstool or the throne of God that's the Ark of the Covenant, right? That's put on the poles. So that mobile God goes in here. This is where we're going to have the Ark of the Covenant, right? With the cherubim on here, which we're going to read a lot about, because wherever the tabernacle goes, or wherever the ark goes, so the tabernacle goes, because God has to dwell with mankind. And on top of the box, we got these two hybrid creatures that are sitting here, and their whole job is to keep interlopers out. You don't get to come in where God is doing stuff, right? He is too holy for that. And to make things more scary, these creatures are woven into the curtains here. They're actually sometimes here. And in the temple, they will also be like here and here, okay, with their wings going. And we'll read all about that in just a second. So in the temple, they're going to really put these like gigantic cherubim in their path. It's awesome looking. Yeah. So God wants his place protected. Guess that's kind of the end roll there, right? This is my space. No one else gets there. Like those of you like Big Bang Theory, right? Sheldon's place on the couch, pretty well protected. Okay, this is even better protected, right? Okay, a few people like that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm here all day. All right, Exodus 25. Let's go to Exodus and find out some more things about these guys. Exodus 25, and we're going to read like 18 through 22. I told you this is our actual Bible study. We're actually going to read Bible passages and talk about them. So who wants to do that doesn't have the book or whatever version that is, the Living Bible?
What were the verses again?
Exodus 25:18 through 22, please.
Mouse.
Remember, this shows up 91 times, so we're going to be here a while.
Make 2 cherubim of gold, make them of hammered work at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub at one end and 1 cherub at the other end. At its 2 ends, make the cherubim of one piece with the mercy seat. The cherubim are to have wings spread out above, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and are to face one another. The faces of the cherubim should be toward the mercy seat. Set the mercy seat on top of the ark and put the testimony that I will give you into the ark. I will meet with you there above the mercy seat between the 2 cherubim that are over the ark of the testimony. I will speak with you from there about all that I command you regarding the Israelites.
Okay, so remember the context that we've got here. This is Exodus. They've just spent 14 chapters escaping from Pharaoh, right? 15 chapters, we get to hear the song of Moses or song of Miriam, right? The singing, woohoo, God has, destroyed his enemies, rise up and be scattered, etc. And then 16 through 19, we're getting this intro to Sinai. 20 is the 10 Commandments. And then the Book of the Covenant is going to be following this. Everything else from here on is going to be ridiculously annoying instructions about how this tabernacle is supposed to be set up. But remember this, everything that's happened in Exodus up until this point, the first 25 chapters or so, right, has been to get to chapters 25 through 40. Right from the very beginning, Moses says, let my people go so that they may worship me in the wilderness. That's been the whole plan, right, to get there. So all that other stuff you could think of as intro. I mean, it's the fun intro, right? It's where God kicks butt on all of his enemies, all the other gods, and shows himself to be the most powerful. But it's all been about making this Ark of the Covenant, right? The Ark of the Covenant. And we know all about that because of our vast knowledge of Hebrew literature, or because one time we watched Indiana Jones. Right? That's really all we need to know everything we need to know. Like, Indiana Jones is fantastic for giving us really great pop theology very quickly. That's kind of more or less accurate, but not really, right? That's what it's all about. But the picture that you see of them carrying that, I mean, I don't see any problems with it. It's a pretty good estimation of what we have. Okay, and anytime you see this word ark, you should not be thinking about a giant boat. Okay, like in Genesis chapter 6 through 9, that is a completely different word. This boat word is the word teva. Okay, and teva only shows up 2 times in the Bible. What's the other time? Brilliant scholars here.
That's
Moses.
That's what Moses, yeah.
Baby Moses.
Yep.
Moses is a baby, right? So it's baby Moses in a basket or a boat. And this is incredibly beautiful theology, but it's not our topic tonight. But I would love to talk about that one. But most of you guys have already heard it. But that's not what it is, right? This is the Ark of the Covenant, which is just a box that is overladen with gold and has a mercy seat. So, the top of the box, here's the bars that have to carry it. And then there's a lid on top of it. And then the cherubim here are going to face each other on the wings, right? So at this mercy seat will come up, and that's how you get into the box. You remember them lifting it, and as soon as they lift it up, right, Indiana Jones is tied to the post, and he says, don't look at it, turn your eyes away, or whatever. I don't remember what he says, right? Because the spirits come out, and they go throughout, and they melt people's faces, and you're not allowed to watch it when you're little because it's just so gruesome, right? Or maybe even when you're adults, I don't know. And we're just like, that's ridiculous. It had nothing to do with that. It was the touching that you couldn't do. Yes, but there is a lot of accuracy in what Indiana Jones is doing here, right? Because the whole idea is that these creatures are an army of these hybrid things, right? They represent an army that will destroy, and we see it happen throughout the Bible. We're going to see it right now. They're just going to go and just kill, like all over the place, right? Sometimes it just seems haphazardly, like there's not even intentionality to it. There is, we know there is, but they just go crazy. Anything around them, right? So yeah, close your eyes. Okay, sure. I don't know if that's what needs to happen, but I don't know if that would really protect them. But they're messing with a sacred object. They're trying to get close to God in ways that you're not allowed to get close to him. And the job of the cherubim is to make sure that they don't do that. Okay, so the mercy seat. So this place right here is God's throne. It's also sometimes called, especially in Isaiah, God's footstool. And so the idea here is that this is where heaven connects to earth. And so you just kind of think of God kicking his feet back on a hassock, right? Like, I'm in heaven, but I'm also in earth. I have both of these things. And when you get to Ezekiel, the cherubim will be what lifts God up. And Ezekiel will look up and he won't be able to see God, but he'll be able to see his feet, right? Because he's God, he's big, he's huge, right? And so we don't see everything. So it's a cool picture, right? Again, it's literature. It's supposed to make you think about things. It's not necessarily supposed to give you a picture of what God actually looks like or actually is, right? It's just a way to describe him in their understanding of him. Okay, and the same way with cherubim, right? There's these weird things, which we haven't even seen what they look like yet. I've just shown you some weird pictures from the ancient Near East. But it's this army of hybrid creatures that go out and attack when you get too close to God. Okay, because you're not allowed into that realm. They're guardian bouncers. That's you just got to remember, bouncers. Cherubim are bouncers.
What do you think of that being a portal into another dimension that we do not have access to?
Yeah, I love that picture. I think it's a great picture of what's going on.
One of the things in an upper division math is that the formulas for movement, gravity, all of the physics formulas work if you add another dimension.
Okay.
Or more.
Yeah. Yep. I've heard the guy from Caltech who does some biblical things. He talks about some like dozens. I think he mentioned as many as like 36 different dimensions. I don't know how all that works. I've heard other philosophers say, no, you can't have more than 4 or 5 or something, but whatever. This is a supernatural world. Like, we're just making stuff up from our dumbness, right? God's bigger than all that stuff.
It also
yeah, I think
means the transition of our souls to be with God in heaven when we die is when we are just spirit and not spirit and body, then we have access to that next dimension.
Yes. Yeah. Into it. Yeah. Another dimension. I like, because dimension doesn't have meaning exactly. Like when we're thinking about it, it's just a different, like in the Marvel universe, it's a realm, right? There's a different realm that you go into. It's a different world. You enter into this different area. And so who's the guy, Riston, that keeps us from getting into Thor's world? Baldur?
Heimdall.
Heimdall, right? It's the guy on the Rainbow Bridge when you're trying to get into this other realm. So you can't get to Thor's world, which is called Migdal is Earth, and what is
Asgard.
Asgard. Thank you. Man, I'm doing bad.
In Monty Python, the Holy Grail, when he's trying to cross the bridge, he's like, do you remember that?
Yes, when he needs a shrubbery. Is that the time?
No, when he has to answer a question to cross the bridge at the end, the very end.
Oh yeah, yeah, and the swallow, which is faster, the European swallow. Yeah, right.
And then he ends up going, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so that's exactly that.
And Serling allows us into the 5th dimension. So
who does?
Rod Serling. Okay, this
Yes,
might
that's
be
right.
older than you, Jay. Sorry.
It is older than me, but I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
So yeah, we get to go into a twilight. So all right. So yeah, let's see here. Anything else from that little bit before we jump into the next verse? You've gotten a lot of information in the last 5 minutes. So like all this stuff and going out, Indiana Jones, Marvel universe, you name it, it's all tied together somehow. And you understand these are our modern myths, right? So superheroes or Percy Jackson or Harry Potter, these are just modern myths trying to give us similar things that the Bible's trying to give us. I mean, obviously not inspired, texts, but they're trying to create a different world for you that you can see and get into in some way, can enter into another dimension. And I remember Max Lucado wrote a book about angels coming, and they had to go through, they had to dodge planets and go around things and stars and stuff like that on their way to Earth. And I think it's fascinating. It's cool to think like that, but I don't think of it that way. I think of it more like they just move from one dimension into the next. Like they're there, but the world gets thinner. Like the veil, the curtain between things, like Lori's talking about, right, gets really thin. All of a sudden you can see and they can talk to you. Like they enter into your world. So one of Sarah Brody, a couple of you guys know, used to talk about the scrim. She taught me about how scrims work in theater. And I've always called it like a scrim theology, where the light shines on it from the background. If it shines on it from the back, you see a whole other world appear, right? So these are creatures that live in this other world, and we can get in there, but we have to be pulled in, right? We have to be invited. Like Isaiah is going to be invited. Ezekiel's going to be invited. Well, Ezekiel's going to be invited. He's going to be pulled by his hair into the other world. It's not really much of an invite, but going to get yanked in. Okay, so let's look at a couple of other texts that deal with the two cherubim above the Ark of the Covenant, just so we get a round picture of this. We're not going to look at every single one, but Exodus 26:1, which is just a chapter later from what we just read. If somebody else wants to grab Exodus 36:8. So there's 26:1, 36:8, and then Numbers 7:89. In case you didn't realize that there were ever 89 verses in a single chapter, it's there.
I'll read the first verse.
All right, Exodus 26:1.
Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twisted linen and blue, purple, and crimson yarns. You shall make them with cherubim skillfully worked into them. You want to read on?
Nope, right there. So they're embroidering in gold into these crimson curtains cherubim. So they're sewing cherubim in there. So that's what you see when you go in, because we want to make sure that you're protected. What about Exodus 36?
And read that. Make another curtain for the entrance to the sacred tent. Make it of finely woven linen and embroider it with exquisite designs using blue, purple, and scarlet thread.
Okay, so woven in by expert hands, with saying almost the same thing, right? But 10 chapters later, because they want to make sure you're getting all this right, all the stuff you're doing. Number 789.
I can do that one.
All right, go for it.
When Moses entered the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from between the two cherubim above the atonement cover on the Ark of the Covenant law. In this way, the Lord spoke to him.
Right, so God speaks out of this, right? The atonement cover, or the mercy seat, or the throne of God, or the footstool of God. It's called all these different things. Okay, it's the Ark of the Covenant. It's where God lives. He lives in a box. Okay, and the Christian church has been keeping him there forever. Yeah, in a box.
Amen.
We need to let him out. Let him out. So that's an interesting kind of question that I want us to kind of delve into. That Esther Hamori brings up over and over again in her book on these on some of these different creatures. Are these cherubim designed to keep us out or to keep God in? It's just a question that she constantly has, because she's like, part of her main thesis is to say that God seems to be the monster in many of these cases. Okay, now this is scholarly. She's not trying to be Christian. She's outside of our little evangelical box for sure. But she's saying God seems to do a lot of things that we don't like. And he uses these creatures to do it sometimes. Right? He's the one who is sending the cherubim to do terrible things. He's the one who sends the Satan to do terrible things later on, the adversary, right? The accuser. Like, he almost could be, I mean, from some people's perspective, the bad guy. In fact, we should probably remember he is the bad guy to almost the entire world at that time, except for Israel, right? Because they all have their own gods. They're worshiping Baal, they're worshiping Mot, they're worshiping Tiamat, whoever, Marduk, in their different gods. And God's coming and he's kicking butt. Like when he destroys the Canaanites, they don't like him very much, right? He's the bad guy in their minds. But sometimes it seems like he's the bad guy even to us. And if you haven't noticed that, it just means you're not really reading carefully enough. So let's start thinking through that question. Are these angels, they're not angels at this point, they're going to become angelic kind of later, but are these beings designed to keep God in? Because God is dangerous. And that's a theme that's definitely all throughout Hebrew Bible, right? That God's dangerous. Don't get too close, right? If you're going to come up into the cloud, you better have some protection. Like I mean, he's constantly saying, don't come. That's the whole reason for sacrifices, right? Because if you're common, you can't get close. Common's fine, but you know, you got to take care of that. You got to make sure that you've been sanctified in order to get in there. You got to put your sun shirt on, your sunscreen, because God's dangerous. The sun is dangerous, even though it's also life itself. So is it possible that they're designed to keep him in? Again, not that they have the ability to keep him in, not like they're more powerful than God, but that he places them there to say, hey, you should be glad there's some guardians here to keep me from just going, right? Because I'm the sun. So I've let them put me in a box, kind of. Maybe. Any thoughts on that? Or is that just a little creepy, scary?
It kind of flies in the face of our attribution of character to God, being almighty and good all the time and so on. He's the powerful side of the covenant, the suzerain. So what he says is the law. Down to atomic forces and gravity and all of that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, those are, again, theological constructs, right?
Right.
And what we're trying to do is to stay biblical, which of course we can't do, right? Of course we have to start bringing things into theology. We have to start theologizing. We have to take some things in the Bible and say, okay, how do we understand this for today? What are we supposed to do with it? But we want to be careful with theologizing because we come up with ideas like almighty, which is a word that actually doesn't show up in the Bible, right? The word mighty shows up in the Bible. That's very different than almighty. And the word like Elyon shows up. And we like to translate that as almighty, but really it just means like God of the mountains. We talked about this before, or God of breasts, actually. Okay, so Elyon shows up, or God of Sabaoth, right? From our great song, A Mighty Fortress is Our God, right? God Sabaoth, which has nothing to do with Sabbath, by the way. Sabaoth is armies, right? But we like to translate it as almighty, but it's just armies. It means God of armies. So some of our theology, which might be fine for us to hold on to, I just want us to say, okay, let's just look at the Bible and see what it does before we jump to the theology. Like, what if our theology got created over millennia or even over dozens of years, maybe much less, recently to factor in things that we're dealing with now? And so we kind of just create these other ideas. That's always my fear. And the truth is that we always do that. We can't help but do that. I just want us to be aware of it when we're doing it.
God's seeking a people, a place, and a presence. And so I think his presence is holy. So I think that the idea of keeping God in kind of, we have to jettison that idea, but keeping humans out is more, I like that better. So I have a problem with the idea of them keeping God in. Now I'd have to look into it.
Yeah, Jace,
Yes.
last week you talked, I brought up the fact that why did God need the all this if he's all these omnis, which I know is theology. Okay. But I remember you saying it was instead of protecting God from us, anyways, it was the opposite. It was like protecting us
From God.
going in rather than him from coming out.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah, I
right?
like that.
Did I get that right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the question, I guess. I'm not really making a statement.
Yeah. Okay.
Which one is it? Is it protecting us from God, or is it protecting God from, from us
No.
going in or him coming out?
We don't have to compartment. It could be a both and, but I would say I have problems with keeping God in, because I think God's
Yeah,
actively
me too.
seeking a place.
Relationship.
He's got the covenant relationship, so he's a relational God, but it's just his presence is holy, so therefore we need high priests and we need sacrifices to get into the holy of holies. And but yeah, I would love to hear the argument of keeping God in, though. I think you said Hamori does that.
Yeah, well, I don't know that she makes an argument so much as suggests the possibility that we should be thinking that way. The argument is made by looking at all these monsters, and that God consistently seems to team up with these monsters to do horrible things, right? Or that seem horrible in our minds. Like, again, if we have in our theology that God is good and he's always doing the right thing, then they're not actually horrible. They just seem horrible to us, which is fair, right? God's bigger than us. He knows more. Maybe he's doing good things and we don't understand them to be good. But that's her argument, is that just look as he deceives this person and this person, right? God sends a deceiving spirit into Micaiah, right? Into the king through Micaiah. He's constantly doing things that seem questionable ethically for us and for him, right? Because we got our ethics at least partially from him.
I want to say this. I just learned this, that anything that goes contrary to this is according to Augustine, anything that's contrary to our beliefs of who God is, that questions his character, should be taken as allegory. That's Augustine. So that's his solution to this problem.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So anything that doesn't match our understanding of the world, we can quickly just say, well, that must be allegory. Yeah, it's a good way to take care of the problem. The other thing I was going to say is this idea of multivocality. So, like, each of you are saying something like, well, we know that God is this, so therefore this couldn't be. But it's also true that maybe this text, and this text present God like this, but this one, and this one present him like this. Is it possible that some texts actually do kind of see him as, I don't like using the word monstrous, but, like an aggressor in weird ways. Like, why does he attack Moses? Why does he attack Balaam? Right? Just standing Balaam did exactly what he said he was going to do. God said, okay, go ahead and go. So he went, and then God comes and almost kills him. And he's like, but you told me to come. He's like, all right, you can go. Like, what just happened? God, what just happened? I don't understand this at all. You told me to do this. Right? So there's some
discipline for growth.
He was trying to get him to grow.
He wants to grow his people.
And his rod and his staff comforted him.
The whole.
Good, Tom. I'm with you.
is that God calls his people to follow him in a suzerain covenant. He
Yep.
called Moses, and through Moses called the people. That's the whole half of Exodus, is getting his people that he grew for 400 years in Egypt to follow him and become the priesthood that reaches the world with the gospel.
Okay, so why was he going to kill Moses halfway there?
I'm not sure he was really going to do that, but Moses needed to think
Right.
he was.
Right. And that's possible,
But
right? We're just
why? But
speculating.
why?
Well, the whole thing is, it's so complicated and bigger than we can comprehend, that he feeds us a little bit at a time, both individually and as a society or humanity, so that we understand more and more. And as long as that understanding approaches a relationship with God, that's good. If it diverges away from God, that's bad.
I believe he was going to kill Moses because of Sephora, his wife. Something about circumcision. Something about there's something going on
Yeah,
there.
Moses wasn't circumcised,
Yeah,
so she circumcised their son
right.
and put it on his feet.
His feet. Yes, very good. You understand the euphemism going on there. So,
Okay.
but still we have the question of why? Like, really? Or like just take the basic things, right? God, in the last one, the fiery serpents come, they're complaining and God sends serpents to kill thousands of people. It's like, that just seems, yeah, if I got my 10 children and I love them as much as the Bible tells me that he loves them, and they're complaining a lot, there's going to be some timeouts, but I'm not putting rattlesnakes in their room, right? You're just like, so you could say he has a good reason for it. That's growth and stuff, but those people are dead now, right? So it still just feels weird, creepy. Like, it's got to at least make you feel something like, I should dig into this more. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm not saying there's not an answer to it. I'm just saying it's a little bit off. God seems to be doing stuff that I would not do as a father.
Well, we also
Yeah, I
got to
thought about
remember this is an ancient people telling this story. And the way they told it was very similar to the ancient civilizations around them, how they understood their gods.
Very important. Everyone here,
Yes,
what Lori is
yes.
saying. Yes.
Lori, you're a good hermeneut. That was good.
God
It's
lets his
from
children tell
Jace's
the story.
teaching. I know this from Jace's teaching. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very important to all this. All right. And yes, what Tom was saying is progressive revelation, right? That God is slowly revealing things over time. And we certainly have more information in the New Testament about this. Although I would hesitate to say that the New Testament got it right where the Old Testament got it wrong. I would just say they're all trying to understand God from their perspective. And maybe there's more information and God is revealing more. But, the cherubim are these weird creatures here, but they're going to show up again in the book of Revelation very differently than they show up here. Right? We're going to get to that next week, of course. But like, did we learn more about them, or did their concept, their culture move past that understanding to a new understanding of what it looks like? Because later we're going to have cherubim, seraphim kind of mixed together in the book of Revelation. Right? They take on this other form, like it's just weirdness. Okay, because I'm guessing nobody's seen these things. I don't know. Maybe they have. Well, let's look at a couple more here. Let's look at how about 1 Samuel 4? 1 Samuel 4, verse 4. So you remember the time that the Ark of the Covenant is captured by the Philistines? They take it to their camp. And so, well, the point that I'm trying to make here is that it's not just an ark of God. It's an ark of the cherubim. Now, it's definitely of God, right? God is the one who dwells there, but he dwells in the midst of the cherubim. And the cherubim, again, are constantly attacking, right? So they go out and they make themselves known to the community in not great ways. So someone read 1 Samuel 4:4 if you happen to have it. And if someone else would grab 2 Samuel 6:2, we'll stop with those two texts.
All right, I got 4:4. So the people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of Hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim. The two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God.
Interesting. It says on the cherub. It says they're on, not between.
My NRSVUE says on.
Interesting. Okay. I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Mine has between in special brackets, so it may be implied.
Yeah, I'm guessing that there's no actual word here. I didn't look this up in Hebrew. I assumed, which is a terrible exegetical move on my part. But I can't. Yeah, there's only so much I can do here. So either way, the cherubim are they're there where God is enthroned. Right? So that's the picture that we have. Now we jump to 2 Samuel. Okay. Remember, this isn't just, again, remember the Lord Almighty stuff that we talked about just a minute ago? That this is the Lord of, let's see. It says, Tom, does your version say they brought back the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord Almighty?
Let me go back to it.
Sorry. Does anybody?
No.
Is that what yours says, Kristen? For 1 Samuel 4:4?
Lord of Hosts.
Lord of Hosts. Okay. All right. So mine, I think I copied the NIV here, but it says the Lord Almighty. So here's one of those words that we were using before, Almighty. But it is exactly what Kristen said. It's the Lord of Hosts or armies. Okay, it's the Lord of armies.
Abba Yasab Cherub. So there isn't any word for the on between either, like you were saying.
Okay, yeah, it's just we just have to figure out what that.
Yep, the Lord of Hosts sits cherubim.
Yep. Okay. So it's Lord of armies, Lord Yahweh Sabaoth, right? That phrase, and he's on the throne in between the cherubim, which makes me wonder if these armies are found, these hosts are found in the cherubim, like the cherubim are parts of the hosts, perhaps, who guard the presence and are going to wreak havoc in this story, right? Remember, you guys know this story, I'm sure, right? Where they put the Ark of the Covenant in the same place with the god Dagon, you know, that Dagon fish one, right? And he falls down in front of them, and then they put it back up, and then it falls down broken, right? Like that they go and they just knock it down, kind of like, you know, you're not going to be put in front of us. No, putting any gods before me, right? The first commandment. But also they're going to be the ones who plague the Philistines, right? The Philistines are going to get all these ulcers, sores, these horrible diseases that are going to come on them. And then later on, they're going to be the ones that attack the Israelites. When it gets back into the camp, they keep going. They're just going, like anything within reach of them, they seem to be destroying. They kill a slew of Israelites. And then, of course, the famous passage that we all know, which is the 2 Samuel 6:2 one. Let's just read that because it's fun. 6:2 through, I don't know, maybe verse 7. Anybody have that one? Somebody's got it.
He and all his troops set out to bring the ark of God from Baal, Judah. The ark is called by the name of Yahweh of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. Between is in brackets.
Yep.
They set the ark of God on a new cart and transported, something just jumped, it from Abinadab's house, which was on the hill, Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the cart and brought it with the ark of God from Abinadab's house on the hill. Ahio walked in front of the ark. David and the whole house of Israel were celebrating before the Lord with all kinds of, in bracket, fir wood, instruments in brackets, lyres, harps, tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah reached out to the ark of God and took hold of it because the oxen had stumbled. Then the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah, and God struck him dead on the spot for his irreverence, and he died there next to the ark of God. Is that far enough?
That's perfect. Yeah. All right. So once again, the Ark of the Covenant, where God dwells between on whatever, enthroned there among the cherubim, right? And then they're walking along, and the ox stumbles, which seems like any good person who loves Jesus in their heart would absolutely grab hold of that ark and hold it up so it doesn't hit the ground and everything doesn't spill out. But God is ticked, right? These are the passages that are like, really, God? Like, could you make an exception in this case? We know it's holy, but like, this is a guy who's really sincere in his heart, but did something horrible, according to that time anyway, right? And it puts everyone's afraid. David's afraid. David doesn't even want to bring it into Jerusalem. He's scared to death. In fact, he abandons the ark for a while. He won't bring it into Jerusalem. Finally, he takes like all the precautions he can possibly take to see if God breaks out against the Israelites, because it's in one of those tents off to the side. And then, he gets back to his dance, his crazy dance again, and the ark is headed up to Jerusalem, up the cosmic mountain. All that is happening. Like, this object, the Ark of the Covenant, is scary. And I think maybe we're supposed to understand it. I mean, it's obviously the holiness of God, but the cherubim are like, right? Like, don't come anywhere near this, right? They just strike out. Like, you can't get into the sacred realm unless they say you can. That's the concept that we have here. And when they build the temple, there's again this series of entrances before you reach the Holy of Holies, right? That always have cherubim on them. Let's see. Well, this is probably a good place to start next time, because I got a bunch of cool pictures to show you about all this. So yeah, I'm okay stopping at 9:04 because I'm sure that you have a few things to say about all this. What say you, my friends? How does this make you feel? What does this make you think?
Maybe Uzzah did a sacrificial act, and the being struck dead wasn't necessarily punishment.
I mean, it says God was angry with him. It burned with anger. But there is a sense in which anything that is sacrificed, right, is harem. So this word is like, it's a word for ban, or to devote, or to lift up, right? So they haremed Jericho. They went and completely destroyed it. Ai, they burned completely as a sacrifice. I'm not sure that we can see this one that way, unless you could make some sort of an argument for Uzzah being a sacrifice. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down. I don't know. My first look at that says he's pretty upset. So again, the cherubim maybe to keep him in, and he comes rushing out, and maybe, I don't know, maybe he fills them with power and they strike out. I don't know. Other thoughts?
How'd they get the ark on the new cart? there's this new cart. How'd they get it on there without touching it? And why didn't God destroy them then? I didn't read back, so I don't know what happened.
I guess I didn't read it either for the sake of this, but I guess I assumed that they walked it through and then they put it on the cart. Like they had it on the poles. And so it had the
so
poles
he
there.
touched the ark, they just touched the poles.
Right.
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
don't know. I'm guessing because I didn't read it right before this, but that could be. Sometimes the text doesn't tell you stuff like that. It just makes you assume, right? Like Moses goes up Mount Sinai like 3 times, but never comes down. We just have to assume that he came back down at some point, like.
Well, the poles were never separate from the ark. They stayed there.
Correct.
Did they?
Yep.
Yes.
So in the tabernacle, they had the long poles on there
Yep.
when it was placed in the tabernacle? Look at you guys remembering so much more about it than me. Good job. All right.
This striking dead of reminds me of Ananias and Sapphira.
Yeah. Yep. Because I guess they did an irreverent act, right? They lied to the Holy Spirit.
And I don't think it was a sacrifice. I don't see that as like any type of like Cain and Abel. That's like a proto Jesus figure with Cain slains Abel. Abel was a shepherd. There's blood. That's kind of proto Jesus type. But I can't see these as like looking towards Jesus. It just seemed like just striking dead.
I think the Ananias and Sapphira, if I recall, it says that the fear of God went out among all the people or something. Like it was intentionally designed as hortatory, right? As like, okay, don't ever lie to me. This is the kind of stuff that happens when you lie. It doesn't actually say, I think, that God struck them down, though. I think it just says they died. Or they fell dead or something like that. I can't remember, but I don't recall. That's always an assumption that God was angry at them and did that. I think it's a fair assumption, but I don't think it says that.
Who would be telling this particular story?
Oh, now that's a hermeneutics question right there.
Yeah.
Good question. Good question.
Yeah. So who would be telling this story? And I assume you mean the one with Uzzah, right? 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
So remember the world, the progress that I gave you, right? Was temple texts are first, tabernacle are second, and Eden story is last. So this is taking place during the monarchy. So we know it's later than the monarchy, or it's at the time of the monarchy at least, right? So then we have to do some real historical critical work to determine when this text would show up. But my guess would be this would be like just barely post-exilic, but probably with some monarchy as a part of it. So remember, it's going to constantly get redacted and edited. So I would guess that it probably starts sometime during the monarchy, probably during the split, when we're trying to argue with who's the better king. Should this be a Benjamite king or should this be a Judahite king? So this is kind of the arguments that would have happened in early United Kingdom and all the way probably till the split. So remember Rehoboam versus Jeroboam a little bit later. So I would probably put temple texts. Gosh, I hope there's no scholars listening right now and I sound smart, because if anybody's out there knows more than me, it's going to look stupid. I don't know. I'd probably put this in 9th century or maybe 10th century.
That's right on. Well, this Bible says 930 BC. I mean, author doesn't say, it says uncertain author though. Has no idea who.
Yeah. We don't know who wrote it, but we're guessing it's after that, at least the beginnings of it, right? It's not going to take its final form for probably 400 years later. maybe 500 years later.
Can
Okay,
you elaborate?
that's when the Eden text will come. What?
Can you elaborate the temple, tabernacle, Eden real quick? Like the what you mean by that?
Yeah, so we have temple texts that are going to take place, like, David, Solomon, right? United monarchy. That's when the temple exists. So, right, Solomon builds the temple. And so we have a lot of talk about what the temple looks like. We're going to do a lot of this starting, it's First Kings. It's going to tell you how the inner sanctuaries made a pair of cherubim out of olive wood, each 10 cubits high, one wing, the first, blah, blah, blah. That's all the temple kinds of things. First Kings. Okay, during the time of Solomon building this temple. Okay, so first temple kind of stuff. Tabernacle is going to show up like Exodus, right? That's when you're supposed to start building the tabernacle and what it looks like. Now that I'm saying that even though that's in the chronology of the text is going to show up first, the tabernacle writing, when they're writing about the tabernacle, is going to show up after the text. So after the temple texts. So this would be later, probably.
Like Second
Okay.
Temple?
Probably not Second Temple. That's probably a little late, but probably maybe after the destruction of the first temple, in between. So exilic period or post exile. Yep. But before 520, when they return. And then the Eden story is something that is put on all of this so that you can see. I mean, my conviction is that Eden is a picture of Israel, right? Adam and Eve are a picture of Israel. So I think this Eden story is going to come back as an intro to the entire story of Israel. It's going to, in fact, it tells the story in 11 chapters, right? It tells the story of Israel, everything that happens from the beginning of Israel to the beginning of Babylon, right? These two fighting groups, right? The beginning of Israel is Genesis 2, and the beginning of Babylon is Genesis 11. So all of this story, the Tower of Babel story, right? So I think they're putting contrast for a reason. And I think that's why most people, when they teach Pentateuch, and I've done this as well, when you teach Pentateuch, you very seldom get out of Genesis 11. Like, you're like, okay, we got to do the whole Pentateuch, and we just never get out of just the primeval chapters. Because you can keep saying, well, this connects to Exodus, this connects to how Deuteronomy works, right? Here's what's going on. It's all just telling that story in miniature. Those first 11 chapters. That's why you could spend a lifetime just doing those 11 chapters. There's so much beauty in there.
I was going to
Just
say, and
great.
isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it's just so brilliantly
It's so
written.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're doing kind of scary things here, but this is actually like, I hope all of you realize, like, I'm into this for a reason, right? Like, I think the literature's beautiful, and I think what it represents is beautiful. God's realm and his world that he's calling us into. So I don't mean to just scare you. I'm just trying to give you the academic perspective on this. Yeah, I think this is important. Probably not very important for what we're doing right now, except for to say there's going to be progress, right, in the text. Sometimes the progress, if you don't know that it's being written backwards, you don't see it quite so much, right? So like when we get to the tabernacle story, the cherubims shift like this, right? All throughout the temple stories, the cherubim are like this. They face outward as you come up the stairs. We're going to talk about all this next week. But then when you get to the tabernacle, they're doing this. Or if you think the tabernacles were started, or the first stories, then they're facing on the covenant, on the seat, the mercy seat, and then they come out wider. Okay, we'll get into more details there, but that's all historical criticism as to when different things show up. But the cherubim are going to change. By the time we get to Ezekiel, they're going to shift. All the things that we see here is going to start describing what they look like. And by the time we get to Revelation, they're going to shift again. They look different. In fact, they never really look the same. Even when in Ezekiel, depending on which passage we're looking at, they have different faces. The same story, their faces change. And if you just say, well, they changed their faces, I don't know. I think we're talking about two different traditions that got put in there. But that's all next week. So we'll talk about all that stuff. Like, and what is the face of a cherub? Think of that one through. In Ezekiel, there are 4 faces. One of them is the face of a cherub. They're like, okay, so the face of the cherub has 4 faces, and one of those is the face of a cherub? I have no idea what you're talking about. Fun stuff. All right. It is 9:17. We've exhausted tonight's work. This was super cool. You guys asked great questions. I had fun. So, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Love you, man.
Thanks,
You know, we'll
Jay.
hang out for a few minutes.
Thank you, Jace.
You're welcome.